What is up, you guys? We are here for our Saturday night secret sermon. This is our Secret Teachings of Jesus series. You can find the Secret Teachings of Jesus playlist on my channel, Light Love Magic. And yeah, so during this series, we delve into the Gnostic Gospels and some of the other texts that were not included in the Bible. And at this moment, we are in the Nag Hammadi scriptures, and we've been studying out of the Gospel of Philip. And so I just always really curious about studying these, and I didn't know when I would have time or, when I would really make it happen. And I thought, well, how cool would it be to just make it a segment? And I think it's become one of my favorite things that we do. And it seems like people are always super passionate in their response about it. So I think that it's everybody's favorite, and I'm glad. Working on some things behind the scenes for y'all. So I will just hint at that and tell you more soon. I don't want to do the whole loose lips sink ships things and exhaust my light. So just letting y'all know, it helps me stay accountable as well. So tonight we are reading, and by the way, we are almost done with the Gospel of Philip. And I feel like Philip has been sort of like my spirit guide for the last couple of years, because just reading in this gospel deeply. And then, over the years, I've asked what are my angels' names and things to that nature. And there's always Philip. Philip is such a strong theme. Philip is definitely my main angel. I've got 3 angels. Al and Bet are the other 2. Aleph, Bet. I know. I figured that out too. I was like, whoa, crazy. But yeah, I don't know. I wondered if maybe Philip, the writer, has been hanging out and helping us through these portions. And I hope he sticks around, even though we're almost ready to finish his gospel. And so we have 3 more portions after this week. So I'm excited because we've been in the Gospel of Philip for a year and a half. But I'm also kind of sad because we've been in it for a year and a half. So he's become a bud, but here we are. Okay, so basically, in case you have never seen one of these episodes before, I'm not a theologian. We're just interested. So this is all for fun and for good kicks and shits and giggles. And so I come in from work and I pick out the portion that's really grabbing me, and then I basically start the camera and I start reading it for you, and then we go through it and I give you the downloads that I'm getting. And a lot of times, and most of the time we're right on the money if I go back and do some research about it later. So I love doing this. It feels like real channeling. All right, so we will begin. This is a very short bit, but I also went ahead and looked up the biblical, the Old Testament portion that is related to this portion. And so just a couple of things before we begin. Studying scripture and holy texts late at night, around the midnight hour specifically, is a very powerful practice to do. A lot of the sages and students still to this day get up late and study at night. And there's a couple of things going on. There's more magic and miracles available to channel the wisdom in and have insight and revelation, because the veil is very thin at midnight. We're at the end of one day and the beginning of the next. So it's we're in this threshold space where the veil is thin. It's also quieter, energetically speaking, at night. There's not as many people's thoughts and noise and negativity filling the air, right? Our aura sort of gets disrupted by everyone else's static. So So that is quieter at night. So the transmissions, when we send our prayers up and when we get downloads coming in, it's like the signal is better and late at night. As silly as that sounds, but it's for real. Okay. So let us begin for real this time. I'm trying to think if I think there was one more thing I was going to tell y'all. Oh, well, I guess it left me. I can't remember. Okay, here we go. So this week's portion is called Abraham's Circumcision. All right. I'm a child. I will never fully grow up. Circumcision. Okay, Abraham's circumcision. When Abraham was able to see what he was to see, he circumcised the flesh of the foreskin, thus teaching us that it is necessary to destroy the flesh. When Abraham, I'm going to read this again, was able to see what he was to see, he circumcised the flesh of the foreskin, thus teaching us that it is necessary to destroy the flesh. So, Abraham was the first man to have a circumcision and perform circumcision as an act of sacred covenant with the Creator, with God. This is how the Creator, how Adonai, Hashem, established the covenant with Abraham. Now, remember, when we read these stories, they may or may not have been historical facts, but what's more important is beyond that, we're reading the story about the person, sure, and we're taking away from that, but there's also codes that we're reading, right? And that's what we've been learning recently about the inner and the outer, and looking beyond the clothing of the Torah, right? And reading the soul of the Torah. So Abraham is the father of the Jewish, Christian, and Islamic faiths. Abraham was the first patriarch to knowingly identify God, because people were worshiping like multiple gods and pantheons and things like that. But Abraham was the first of his time to recognize that it was one God, and that he was going to set himself apart from those who worship the pantheon and start a belief based in his faith and his certainty and this understanding of this one God. It's all one God. So that just gives you a little bit of groundwork. I feel like Abraham was after Noah. Hold on, I've got my Hebrew Bible here, which is really great. So the pages are huge. And you can, yeah. So Abraham was after Noah, though. So there were prophets and patriarchs that knew God, that God made himself known to, right? But these are through the generations, everyone's spread out, and it's like a sparsely populated, and there was the Great Flood and everything. So it's like these key people, God has these personal one-on-one relationships, but he's not widely known and understood and spread out and believed in. I think most of the people were worshiping pantheons based on the natural sources of the natural resources, right? Like the vegetation gods and the celestial gods and, you know, all of those different assigned gods, like the gods that were over the weather and all of those. So Abraham established a covenant with God officially that he would birth these people, a people who would be, you know, God's chosen people who would keep this covenant and believe in God, and they would be his people, and their covenant would keep them in union. So that is basics Abraham context. But Abraham has many struggles, challenges, and adventures in his life. He had a difficult time. Well, first of all, Abraham's first big sacrifice that he made to God, God told Abraham he had to leave his people and leave his father's house, and they had to move away from those people because they were worshiping the pantheon. And so he was like, I need you to move away from these people and go on your own. And so Abraham heeded the call and did that, and went on, you know, sojourning, looking for his place. And God brought him to this land near Bethel. And he was like, all of this nearby land one day is going to be yours. And he kept like giving Abraham these promises. And Abraham, when God spoke to Abraham, Abraham was quick to obey. So that was sort of setting up the relationship between Abraham and God. God knew, you know, okay, if I talk to Abraham, he listens, he takes action, he does what, you know, he follows the guidance he's getting. And he's willing to sacrifice, right? He had to uproot himself and go and leave with no guarantees, right? No specific, you know, instructions. It was just like, here, go, and this land will be yours. You'll find it when you get to it, you know, and you got to leave everybody you know and uproot yourself. Like it's a difficult thing to think about doing, you know. And he did it, right? And he took his family with him. They had, you know, some grandkids. I mean, Abraham didn't have grandkids, but his like brother had sons, and, you know, they had family, right? So they moved their family and they went and they started over. And so they had a big enough tribe, though, that they had to split up, and they didn't have enough resources on the land to take care of everybody. So like Abraham liked his son, his nephew Lot, and he was like, I don't want to have beef with you. Like, y'all, you pick where you're going to go with your people. We need to spread out so our livestock can thrive. I don't want to have any bad blood. Like, love you, you my bro. You my nephew. So Lot was like, the River Jordan area looks well watered. I'm gonna go that way. Because Abraham was like, if you go left, I'll go right. If you go right, I'll go left. Whatever. Just whatever you want. So Lot decides to head over near to Jordan, where everything looks like it's nice and watered, but it's also near Sodom and Gomorrah, a very like wild and sinful place. So he goes, and it's wicked, right? So he goes and he settles over there, and Abraham is he's settled in Canaan, and God's like, wow, Abraham, look out. This is all yours. It's all going to be yours someday. And you're going to have progeny, and it's going to be theirs, and all this stuff. And he's like, well, I don't even have kids yet. And like, I'm like 75, 90, like, you know, and God's like, it'll happen. And he's like, what? And he's like, no, for real. And so basically Abraham is just like, okay, I'm late in life. I haven't had any kids. I'm going to have my servants be my heirs. And God's like, no, I'm going to give you children. So Abraham is like, okay, I guess I'm trusting that everything's going to work out. I don't know. Here we are, though. It is what it is. And so time goes by, and one day God approaches Abraham, and he's like, Abraham, I have a covenant to make with you, but I'm going to need you to circumcise yourself. And so Abraham, and he's like, it's not just you, it's like all your sons, all your family, anybody that is going to be in our covenant and our people, the people that you have bought, the people that you've adopted, like anybody that's under your household, they have to be circumcised in order to keep the covenant. And if they aren't circumcised, they have to be sent away from their people. So this was very, very serious. But in return, it was like Abraham would be blessed. He would have like many nations would come from him. Kings would come from him. You know, the people would be blessed, and those who cursed Abraham would be cursed, and those who blessed Abraham would be blessed. So here we are, and Abraham goes through with the circumcision at age 99. That's important here. Abraham is 99. 99 is the end of a cycle, right? And it's not just 9. It's like 9 is the end of a cycle, but 99 is like 10 times the end of a cycle. It's like 9 on 9. It's like end on end. It's like completion on completion. It's like, wow, you finished the work. So it's like Abraham is demonstrating, okay, he's completed a certain level of tikkun correction here in his ability to sacrifice himself and his ability to be obedient to God and to give of himself and to not ask twice or think twice about it. He just obeyed and he did it. So Abraham is giving of himself in this completion of the cycle. Something has been fulfilled. The cycle, his tikkun is fulfilled. There's some hint, there's some emphasis on that fulfillment, the fulfillment of something, and the fulfillment of his sacrifice. Now, Ishmael, his son, by Hagar, the servant woman. So here's the thing. Because Abraham and his wife Sarai, it's like spelled Saria at first. Before the covenant and the circumcision, Abraham was Abram and Sarah was Sarai. It was spelled weird. Sarai. I don't know. Like it's Sarah, but spelled weird. And so once Abraham went through with the circumcision, during this big, like, let's have an official covenant, God renamed Abram Abraham. And he named Sarai Sarah with an H. Sarah, Sarah. Now, the changing of the spelling of these words would change the numerical value of their names. And when you learn Hebrew and the significance of the gematria that's going on, you can understand the root symbolism and meaning and encoding of the words that are being chosen by their similarity or affinity of their numerical value, right? That's part of the root word that you look for, or the root that you look for. It's like certain words share the same numerical value, and so you know that there's some sort of overlap in their energetic resonance and their frequency. So once Abram's name was changed to Abraham, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that then gave him his name the same numerical value as the tetragrammaton. And I don't know what the numerical value is off the top of my head, but it wouldn't be crazy to think that it was 613, because that's how many precepts there are in the Torah. If I'm getting the number right, if I'm remembering it right. I might be remembering all that wrong, but my hunch, and I believe that I do remember my Kabbalah teacher talking about this, that when Abraham's name was changed from Abram to Abraham, that this changed the numerical value of his name, and I believe I remember them saying that it changed the numerical value to the same as the tetragrammatron, which is like saying, it's like God saying to Abraham, you share affinity with me. I want your name to have the same numerical name as mine, brah. We got a covenant, brah. So think about fast forward when Jesus changes Simon's name to Peter. That would have changed Peter's numerical value of his name and what it meant and the frequency that gave off and the meaning behind it. So Sarah was also given a new name, and her name would have changed numerically too, but I don't remember hearing that talked about. And so I don't want to venture to guess what it is, but I'm sure that hers has a significance, being that she is the divine feminine, or the vessel. In that Abraham would be representing the Father, our Father, Father God, and then the Father who gave, who is impregnating the vessel, Sarah, right? With the progeny, the offspring, or the creation of mankind, the children that would follow, that would be the children of Abraham. Okay, so it's established that their names have changed, and it's foretold to them that they're going to have a son, Isaac, even though Sarah's 90. And so what happened, because they didn't think they were ever going to have kids, Sarah was like, look, Abraham, I don't want us to not have children, so I think we should use Hagar as our surrogate mother. Except it wasn't like that. They were just like, go rape our servant girl. But people get really hung up on that. But yes, and but that's not the point of the story. It's not, but I think a lot of people are dangerously taking that as a point of the story. So they go and do their own thing instead of waiting on God's good timing. That's the part where we should pay attention to, is that Sarah and Abraham, or Abram and Sarai, didn't wait for God's timing to give them a child. They went and they were reactive, and they took from a place of fear, and then they created darkness and chaos by forcing their servant girl into a pregnancy against her will. And then it said Ishmael was a donkey of a child or something like that. And it meaning he was like a wild, difficult kid. And so then you've got, you forced the situation, and now you've got chaos, and now you've got Ishmael, the problem child. You've destroyed Hagar, and now they can't deal with it at one point, or Sarah, once they get pregnant with Isaac, she's like, well, Ishmael's gonna want to inherit, and he's gonna get in Isaac's way. So they send Hagar and Isaac, or Ishmael, off to fend for themselves. It's a whole drama. It really is. But there's symbolism here happening. And there's also the point where if Sarah and Abraham hadn't have become reactive and taken from Hagar in scarcity and fear and lack, then they wouldn't have ended up with the chaos that they ended up sowing because of that. So that is a lesson there. But back to Abraham and the circumcision. So fast forward, Abraham is always showing God he's obedient, and he's quick to listen, and he's quick to act on God's instructions and guidance. And so we come to a point where there was even a time where Lot got kidnapped and held ransom, and Abraham was able to like take some troops and go get them. And then on the way back, they were met by like the Melchizedek, and it was a very brief explanation, but this was all just more crazy things that Abraham did and went through before, he even had kids at, the age of 99. Oh yeah. And so what's interesting, okay, so 99, end of the cycle, is when he's sacrificing his flesh and entering into a covenant of going into this next level. Ishmael is getting circumcised as well, that he hasn't been sent away yet. So Ishmael is getting circumcised as well. And Ishmael is 13. And that is the age where boys are bar mitzvahed because they get the next level of their soul. Girls is 12. So we all have these base level souls to start with when we're born. And then when we are 13 for a boy and 12 for a girl, we get the next level of our soul. Because at that point, we have our own free will and our own conscious choice that we can make. We're expected to start learning how to choose for ourselves and take responsibility for ourselves at that point. So no longer are we directly attached to our parents' tikkun. We start to have our own tikkun at age 12 and 13. So we get the next level of the soul. So Ishmael is getting circumcised when he is ending the cycle of his childhood, of his youngest self, from his most immature self, and he is now stepping into his next level, completing a cycle of childhood and innocence and being owned under the parent, and then coming into his own independence, his own personhood. And so this is when the covenant is starting for him. He's getting circumcised here, and this is a sacrifice of the flesh. So I think it's interesting that both Abraham and Ishmael are pivotal key points of Ishmael leaving the immaturity of the child self, the undeveloped soul, the unawakened soul, the child, and Abraham being an example of someone who has come into full maturity, who can knowingly and consciously sacrifice the flesh, right? At the end of this completion of cycles on cycles, right? So for Abraham, that might have been that he had already come through cycles and cycles of tikkun correction, of awakening, of becoming, of earning wisdom and changing himself, of proving again and again that he shows up when the Creator gives the call and he is obedient and follows the guidance of the Creator. He trusts the Creator. He is certain in the Creator. So, when Abraham was able to see what he was to see, he circumcised the flesh of the foreskin, thus teaching us that it is necessary to destroy the flesh. Now, Abraham was sacrificing his flesh. What that really means is that Abraham was willing to sacrifice the body consciousness and the desire to receive instant gratification and the desire to receive for the self alone. He set the precedent as the first example to lay down his flesh in order to share affinity with the light of the Creator. I am going to say no. I am going to cut away what is the lesser self, the lower self, the self of the ego, the self of the carnal mind, who's like the animalistic self, who's trying to survive and fight and lust and grab and greed and take, that carnal mind, versus the higher mind, right? And so we practice restriction in our spiritual discipline of building the vessel, of preparing the vessel, of making our soul, the vessel, more like that of God, more like that of the Christ. And so in order to do that, we have to cut away layers and layers and layers of our flesh consciousness, of that layer of the self that makes us want to get angry, or to get gratification by talking about somebody in a negative way. The part of us that wants, that feels greedy, or that wants power, or that lusts after people or things, the part of us that's scared and wants to stay small and insecure, right? Those are those layers of the flesh. And so there's so many to choose from, right? Comparison, judgment, criticism, domineering, like so many layers of the flesh. And it's like they're all defense mechanisms, and they're all false masks. And so we peel those off layer by layer by layer to reveal the true self, to reveal the pure self, to reveal the whole self, the corrected, awakened soul, the healed soul, who is in vibrational resonance with our perfected spirit. So, to Abraham, cut away layer of his flesh, which is the extra skin. I guess most of you know what we're talking about here, what foreskin is. So Abraham made that flesh sacrifice and set the example of laying down one's own flesh, making a sacrifice, a flesh sacrifice, sacrificing the flesh. It's like over and over and over again, we see these like flesh sacrifices in the Bible, meat, like goat, lamb, sheep, birds, right? It's all this flesh that's getting sacrificed, right? But then you only see a couple of examples of people who have to sacrifice their own self, which is Jesus. But guess who did that first? Or who was tested to do it first? Abraham. Abraham gave his flesh off of his foreskin. That was the first person who was like, I'm literally sacrificing my flesh for God, for this covenant, for all those who would come after me, and, for my family, for my progeny. And so he did something very difficult. He did an act of sharing that cost him something, right? He put skin in the game, literally. I wonder if that's where that saying comes from. So what that actually did, though, was it was the first act of self-sacrifice that gave the precedence to create the vessel for the people of Abraham and future generations to come to receive the mercy and blessings of God that would follow as a result of that covenant. For instance, just after the circumcision, when Abraham was recovering in his tent, it's like all hot, and he's like, oh, Abraham's hot in his tent. He just had his circumcision. He's miserable. He sees 3 men coming, and he like runs out to meet them, and he brings them water to wash their feet. He brings them refreshment. And as it turns out, these 3 men are angels, and they're on the way to Sodom and Gomorrah. And they're on their way to destroy the city, because the city has become so evil and so negative and so vile that there's no way around it. It just has to be destroyed by angels. And it's just like the flood, right? The flood that wiped out mankind in the time of Noah, and Noah's family was preserved. this time around, it was like, okay, we don't have to go that extreme, but we're like, this one city is out of control. And so Abraham pleads on behalf of the city. He's like, what if there's like 30 righteous people living there? Like, you can't destroy the whole city. And they're like, okay, Abraham, are you confident that we'll find 30 righteous souls in the city? And he's like, maybe not. Maybe there's 20 righteous souls in the city. And they're like, cool. Yeah, let's see. Let's see if we can find those 20 righteous souls. If we can find 20 righteous souls in Sodom and Gomorrah, we won't destroy the city. And Abraham's like, well, maybe you can find like 10 righteous souls in Sodom and Gomorrah and save the city. And they're like, sure, we'll save the city for 10 righteous souls. And then Abraham was like, you know what? Better yet, I have a nephew there. And he is a good man. And he's part of my people. Lot wouldn't have known about the covenant yet because, like, it was fresh. It was, like, from that afternoon. But Lot's good for it. Like, Lot is a righteous person and he has a righteous family, and he has to be saved. He can't be destroyed in the city. And so they're like, okay, we will go find Lot and we will warn him of the destruction to come, and we will give him a fair shot to get out of the city before we destroy it all. And so that's what they do. They are, I just remembered I didn't put my baked potato in. So sad. So Lot and his family are warned or whatever, but like that's neither here nor there. We're not going to talk about Lot and all of that. But because Abraham had just given that sacrifice and made that covenant, it was like, boom, right after that. It was like he didn't know that this would be something that would build the vessel to save Lot, right? So that act of self-sacrifice paved the way for Lot to be saved and for Lot to be spared. However, just after this, 1 year later, Abraham and his wife Sarah would finally get pregnant with Isaac. And so Isaac is Abraham's like only begotten son with Sarah. And so Isaac, it's like his pride and joy. He loves Isaac more than anything. And then God comes out and he's like, hey, I need you to sacrifice Isaac. And Abraham is like, okay. He's like, did I hear this correctly? But Abraham obeys, and he takes Isaac, and Isaac is like it doesn't seem like this in the Bible, but Isaac is like 30 by the time that he's taking it. It's not like Isaac is a little boy. Like Isaac knows what's happening. And so Abraham can't believe it. Isaac is his pride and joy, his treasure, his miracle child. And he takes him and he's gonna make him a burnt sacrifice, and Isaac's like carrying the wood for his own sacrifice, and Isaac is like 30 at this point, so he's in on it. Like he knows what's going on. He's a devoted son of Adonai. He is in the covenant, like he's part of the people. So he's actually carrying his own wood, right, to go sacrifice himself. Abraham is taking his son, and he's got to give his son in sacrifice. And he's got him tied down, and he's about to bring down the dagger when suddenly the goat or a ram, it's a ram. A ram appears, because the ram, that is the ram that is going to be the Passover ram. So this ram appears, and Abraham is like, is this our sacrifice? are we supposed to sacrifice the lamb? And he was like, okay, look, this could just be me wanting it to be the answer. And God told me I had to sacrifice you, so we're going through with this. And so he's like, okay, I know that there's a ram there, but I'm just still going to sacrifice you because this is what we're supposed to do. And he almost does it, and God's like, wait, we sent the ram. It's from us. It's from me and the angels. We sent the ram. We needed to test you, but you passed the test. You were willing to give your son, your only begotten son. And so for that, we have redeemed Isaac, and we have brought you this sacrificial ram instead. Foreshadowing to come, this set the precedent, this laid the foundation for God to send his only begotten son to be sacrificed, to be the sacrificial lamb, to pay the price for not only all of Israel, but all of Christendom, for all who would ever believe in him. Knowing the whole time that was what was going to happen to him. So, the fact that Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son was that great act of sharing and self-sacrifice and restriction of the desire to receive for the self alone. That level of certainty, of trust, of obedience, that opened up and paved the way and was the foreshadowing and the foretelling of the coming of the Messiah, who would carry his own cross to his own sacrificial slab, where he would be sacrificed willingly. Now, some other secrets about what this really means under the surface of the sacrifice, in addition to the foreshadowing and the prophecy of the coming of the Messiah, of the coming of Jesus, who would die for our sins, the only begotten Son of God. The Abraham represents right column Tikkune. Abraham was so merciful and kind and obedient and gentle. He would never hurt a fly. It was a very difficult notion for him to imagine harming another person, even at obeying God's command. He wasn't a person of violence or of aggression. He wasn't. He didn't have left column tikkun. He was almost over sharing and overly kind. When we have a right column tikkun, we err on the side, and we're guilty, we're generous to a fault, and we err on the side of oversharing, of overgiving. So Abraham, in that act of being willing to murder his son or do something that would be considered questionable or violent or malicious or dark in any way, he was correcting his tikkun by being willing to do something that seemed stern or harsh, or severe for the sake of God, as being obedient to that voice. Now, when we overgive and when we overshare, we create chaos. We create bread of shame. And it would today on my run, I was just given this insight: calories of chaos, right? When we have bread of shame, it creates calories of chaos that have to be burnt off, right? Because otherwise, the karmic weight will keep packing on. So if we overgive, we create negativity in the situation. And the left-hand column, tikkun, that was Isaac. He was a selfish person who had negativity around his selfishness. And he was more prone to generally being darker or negative. And so for him, it was correcting his tikkun to do the ultimate act of self-sacrifice, of act of sharing, of act of generosity. So, Abraham's circumcision. When Abraham was able to see what he was to see, he circumcised the flesh of the foreskin, thus teaching us that it is necessary to destroy the flesh. If we want to build affinity with the Creator and align with our higher destiny and the version of the self and the identity of the self that we have in God, in that higher destiny, then it is required of us to sacrifice our flesh. We have to sacrifice the current level of consciousness, the body consciousness that we are reflexively operating in. And we have to rise above that human animal nature. And we have to rise into our divine human nature. So we have to transcend those animal instincts and those reactionary behaviors and reactivity and affect consciousness. And we have to become like the Creator, who's the cause, who's not affect consciousness, who is the cause, who is consistent, grounded, and eternally emanating love, unity, oneness, right? Fulfillment. So, in order to become more like the Creator, more patient, more unconditionally loving, more giving, more prolifically creating things, we have to restrict our lower consciousness, our flesh consciousness. Even to be a prolific artist or creator, you have to restrict the consciousness of the flesh that wants to procrastinate, that wants to get distracted, that wants to do this and this and this, that wants to think about how they'd love to do anything. They would love to do art more than anything, except for when it's time to sit down and do the art. I would love to do anything rather than make this art right now, right? We have to restrict the body consciousness in order to allow for the soul to radiate and shine through, right? In order for our kindness and friendship and humanity to come through, we have to restrict our selfishness and our temperamental nature and our judgmentalness, right? So there's so much. But in order to really align with that destiny, we have to let go of the former self, the lower self. Now, one more thing that's interesting about the connections here. So, in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve ate of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and then they fell from the garden of perfection and paradise. And then all the souls of mankind have come from the seed level soul of Adam and Eve. And so from that moment on, we are the descendant souls of Adam, correcting for the sin of Adam, doing our tikkun. It just so happens that when Adam and Eve ate the apple, it wasn't really an apple they ate. So what happened was they were new creations and they were paired together like man and wife, but they weren't allowed to have sex until midnight Friday night when they were finished cooking, right? They had to be able to establish the level of consciousness needed to be able to handle such a revelation of light, and they needed some more maturity before that happened. They needed some more protection around them. So they needed to wait until midnight when they would be protected by the surrounding light of Shabbat in the midnight hour, and they could come into union then. And at that point, they would have been, I think, fully alive and created for like 12 hours. But what happened was that they jumped the gun. And they couldn't wait long enough. It's like everything they were given in the garden. They were like, okay, here's a bit of light, eat this fruit, but can you eat this fruit focused on the fact that you are eating this food, and you want this food to be for the sake of the fulfillment of the Creator, and you have the Creator in mind as you are eating this fruit, and you're like enjoying this fruit to the fullest of its fullness, but then you're also thinking like, wow, the Creator made this, and I'm enjoying this for the Creator, and I want the Creator to enjoy this through me. And it's not just about you taking for yourself. It's like you're sharing the goodness with the Creator in it. And they're like, yeah, I can do that with eating an apple. Okay, cool. Can you do that when you're like looking out at the garden and you're saying how beautiful things are? And they're like, yeah, I can maintain that consciousness and I'm doing that. Yeah. It's okay. They were managing. And then he was like, hey, can you wait until midnight before you have sex with each other? And they were like, no, we don't think so. I don't think we can do that. So they took reactively. They received for the self alone, and they received instant gratification. And if they had just waited a few more hours, then we would have been living in perfection. We wouldn't even be living in this material world. We would be living in Barbie world, where no one ages and no one has to eat real calories, and everything is just light and everything is perfect all the time. No pain, no suffering, no death. But they couldn't wait. So basically, whenever we are able to receive with a little bit of restriction, then we can receive without bread of shame. And so you restrict just a little bit. So when we receive our sustenance through our paycheck, we restrict a little bit by giving 10% back to God through charity and through spiritual sources of nourishment, right? When we receive a new relationship, right, for that relationship to really be successful, we got to practice a little restriction and not just completely consume the person up and be lost and consumed with one another, and then completely abandon ourselves and our routines and our lives and everybody around and that whole thing, and then it all just kind of like burns out, right? That old chestnut. What happens when you take a relationship slower? You develop a real bond, you develop a foundation, and the relationship lasts. So when we receive, it's best to do so in a way that we practice a bit of restriction, that we're not just taking in desperation, but we're able to say, I can take this or leave this, I'll survive without it, but if you insist, then I'll have some. Okay? So with sex specifically, this is the number one temptation of humanity. This is the number one temptation of the flesh. And really, all of the other temptations boil back down to this one temptation: sex. You want power? Why? Because you want to have sex. You want money? Why? Because you want to attract people to have sex with. It's like everything kind of boils down back to our instinct as a species to want to have sex, and that's our lower carnal mind. It drives our greed, it drives our lust for power, drives all of that, drives all of our wicked, evil nature. It's also, sex is one of the most positive ways that the Creator reveals light in this world. But where there is the most light, there is the most darkness, or there's the most challenge to that light. So there's the most darkness attacking that light. So that's where sex can open the most miraculous power and literally create life and bring the most fulfillment. It can also bring, it can also be the portal and gate of a lot of darkness and wicked behavior in people and wicked motivations, and because it drives the greed and the pursuit of money as well. And money itself isn't bad. It's really good. It can be used for really great things. It can be used to share and help and build and create. But it can also drive people to do horrible, evil acts of inhumanity, as we're seeing play out right before our very eyes, worse than ever. So being able to restrict this specific organ, right? That is the original cause of trouble and source of mischief and trouble, right? Being able to sacrifice a piece of that flesh is like going directly into like the belly of the beast, essentially. It's saying, okay, this is the greatest temptation here. This is the greatest possibility to open up light in the world, but this is also under fire to be the most vulnerable to darkness. And so in order to protect this, I need to practice some restriction here by giving some of it up, by saying it doesn't own me, I own it. And so what happens when a man circumcises his penis? The penis becomes more exposed, but it also becomes a little bit less sensitive than it would be if it were uncircumcised. So again, it's like the truth is always present, layer after layer, metaphor after metaphor. Like it's just true everywhere. It's like, okay, by sacrificing, this, where you can have the most pleasure, there's the most darkness here. So uncircumcision, where you're taking for the self and you're protecting your best interests, all for the self alone, you're also breaking the covenant. So here's the passage where God talks about the circumcision. So when Abraham was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless. I will make my covenant between me and you, and I will greatly increase your numbers. Abram fell face down, and God said to him, as for me, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. Just like God is the father of many nations, right? He's showing Abraham in this symbolic way, I want you to build affinity with me, and you are showing me that you are building affinity with me. This isn't about the literalness of the way that it's playing out, but more we should see is that Abraham was making himself more like God, more like the Christ. He was setting the example of the coming of the future Christ by sacrificing himself, by restricting his desire to receive for the self alone, by restricting his desire to receive instant gratification. He became a vessel of sharing and a vessel through which the light could be channeled through and shared with the world. So when we hear about the nation of Israel and the confusion around not wanting to go against the nation of Israel, what we need to understand is that Israelites we're not talking about a political divide of here this is this place with borders and this government. This is not what we mean by the nation of Israel. An Israelite is someone who is making themselves after the image of God. They are choosing that consciousness. They're choosing to keep that covenant by their actions, by their devotion, by their discipline. And then the nation of Israel includes all those people. It's like when people say everyone under Christendom, and it includes all the Christian people, all the population of all the Christians. The nation of Israel isn't just talking about genetically Jewish people. It's talking about people who are keeping that covenant to correct their soul, to correct for the sin of Adam, and to make themselves in the image of God, the God of Abraham. That is the nation of Israel. Not the way it's been twisted for people to believe that you can't disagree with Israel, the government. That is just nationalism spinning things into propaganda to get people confused and manipulated to support their cause. Because no one supports a cause with more fervor than someone who thinks that they're being obedient to God, especially people who are scared of that God's going to punish them. Okay, so let's get back to it. So when Abraham was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am God Almighty, walk before me and be blameless. I will make my covenant between me and you, and I will greatly increase your numbers. Abram fell face down, and God said to him, "As for me, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. I will make you very fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings will come from you. I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you for generations to come, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you. The whole land of Canaan, where you now reside as a foreigner, I will give you as an everlasting possession to you and your descendants after you, and I will be their God." Then God said to Abraham, "As for you, you must keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you, for the generations to come. This is my covenant with you and your descendants after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You are to undergo circumcision, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and you. For the generations to come, every male among you who is 8 days old must be circumcised, including those born in your household or bought with money from a foreigner. Those who are not your offspring, whether born in your household or bought with your money, must be circumcised. My covenant in your flesh is to be an everlasting covenant. Any uncircumcised male who has not been circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin will be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant." Okay, so when it says when they're 8 days old, this is referring to, so there's 7 days of week, and the 7 days of the week, and those represent like the 7 dimensions, and the 7, like the 7 days of the week represent the natural world. And the 8th day represents above the natural world, miracles, when miracles are revealed. This is why the menorah is 8 days, why we do Hanukkah for 8 days. 7 days is the natural world, but the 8th day is when we enter into the miraculous. There is also significance in the 8 Sefirot in the tree of life that make the cluster of Sefirot called Zeran Pin. It is in the upper realm. So it's related. It's like when we are, the 8th day connects us to the upper realms, making this sacrifice of the flesh of the natural world helps us rise above the natural world and into the world of the miraculous, into the world of the everlasting. Okay, any male who has not has broken it. Okay, so God also said to Abraham, "As for Sarai, your wife, you are no longer to call her Sarai." I don't know if that, I'm not saying that right, but we're just distinguishing the difference. "Her name will be Sarah. I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. I will bless her so that she will be the mother of nations. Kings of people will come from her." Abraham fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, "Will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? And Abraham said to God, if only Ishmael might live under your blessing." And then God said, "Yes, but your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful and will greatly increase his numbers. He will be the father of 12 rulers." So I'm wondering if he's the father of those who would eventually be the 12 rulers over the 12 tribes of Israel. "And I will make him into a great nation. And then I'm sure that this is some sort of reference to the 12 rulers being the 12 planets of the zodiac, being like the ruling energies of the psyche of mankind. I will make him into a great nation, but my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you by this time next year. When he had finished speaking with Abraham, God went up from him. On that very day, Abraham took his son Ishmael and all those born in his household or bought with his money, every male in his household, and circumcised them, as God told him. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised. His son Ishmael was 13 years old when he was circumcised. Abraham and his son Ishmael were both circumcised on that same day. And every male in Abraham's household, including those born in his or her house or in his household or bought from a foreigner, was circumcised with him. My leg is falling asleep. I've been sitting on it. All right, y'all. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say about this. And I think we've covered it. We've covered the foreshadowing of the sacrifice of Jesus. We have talked about the relevance of the symbolism of Isaac carrying his own wooden kindling for his own wood, like burnt sacrifice, and Jesus carrying the cross. We've talked about how Abraham's willingness to be obedient and sacrifice himself set the stage for God's mercy to be shown again and again for generations and generations to come. Beginning immediately with Lot being rescued or saved in Sodom and Gomorrah. And the significance of, in order to keep our covenant with God, it is important that we sacrifice our flesh, right? I can study all day, but if I'm not becoming less of a bitch, then what is the point of this, right? Like, I've got to become a more sensitive person. I've got to become a kinder person. I've got to become a less temperamental person, right? Even a less sad person or a less downtrodden person, whatever it is that our ego uses to get in there, into the gaps and mess with us and hold us back from becoming that fully realized divine self. That's the part of me that I have to take to the altar and to sacrifice without a second thought. Give it up. Let go of that. Restrict that flesh. Right? And it's not about like denying being so stern and strict and not having any joy in life or any fun, but it's about changing our consciousness, changing our hearts, changing our perceptions and the way that we see things and the way that we treat one another and ourselves and the way that we look at things, right? Yeah, I think some people get so caught up in obsessively being puritanical, but they're not changing their spirit. They're not changing their soul. They're not changing their heart. They're just watching pure flicks instead of watching a rated R movie. They're not cussing, they're trying to obey the rules and live, be squeaky clean, but like they're still unkind and uncompassionate, not necessarily, but hypothetically, right? So it's about sacrificing the flesh. When Abraham was able to see what he was to see, like God revealing all this to Abraham, it wasn't like God was just sitting there like eating an apple. Like this was revealed to Abraham like in a revelation, and then he had to like trust that, right? It's wild. So when Abraham was able to see what he was to see, He circumcised the flesh of the foreskin, thus teaching us that it is necessary to destroy the flesh. And it's necessary to destroy the flesh to get what we want, to get the blessings that are coming for us to us in our lives. That's literally what we're talking about day after day and week in and week out, as we are facing these tests and passing these tests and initiations and changing and transmuting and doing the transformation, which reveals the miracles, which reveals the blessings. That's exactly what we're talking about here. All right, y'all, when Abraham was able to see what he was to see, he circumcised the flesh of the foreskin, thus teaching us that it is necessary to destroy the flesh. Was there a 131 or rejoice? There was a cliff note. When Abraham was able to rejoice, he circumcised the flesh of the foreskin. So that could have been translated. Okay, so when Abraham was able to see what he was able to see, what he was to see. When Abraham rejoiced in what he was to see, he circumcised the flesh. Either way, he joyfully obeyed and did his thing. He did what he needed to do. All right, you guys. That is all for tonight. We will be back together tomorrow for our weekly energy oracle forecast. Until then, peace be with you. Ciao.